Houston, station is ready.
NASA headquarters, this is Mission Control Houston. Please call station for a voice check.
Station, this is headquarters. How do you hear me?
Hello, headquarters. The International Space Station has you loud and clear.
Awesome. Well, this is such a pleasure. My name is Cheryl Warner in the Office of Communications. However, today I'm calling you on behalf of the Internet. We asked our followers on Twitter using the hashtag AskNASA and our friends on Facebook, what do they want to ask you? So they did not disappoint. They asked thousands of questions, and I know we don't have time for all of them, but since you're ready, I'm going to jump right in. Our first question comes from Chris on Facebook. He asks, what age did you realize you were interested in space?
Chris, that's a great question. I know for me, I actually don't even remember a time when I didn't want to be an astronaut. I think like a lot of little kids, it sounds like a great thing that you want to do. And in my case, I just never grew out of it. So from the time I was young, probably even before kindergarten, I was dreaming of space and being a space explorer.
And the answer is actually pretty similar for me. My mom tells me that I was 5 years old when I started saying I wanted to be an astronaut. And my first memory of it was in the first grade, and our teacher asked us to draw a picture of what we wanted to be when we grew up. And I drew a picture of an astronaut in a spacesuit on the surface of the moon next to the flag, kind of that iconic image that people have. And just like Christina, I never stopped saying it my whole life either.
Awesome. Well, our next question comes from Mary on Twitter. She wants to know, and maybe Jessica, you can answer this since you just got on station, does the air feel or smell different when you're moving from the Soyuz spacecraft to the International Space Station?
You know, there's this smell that we call the smell of space, which is really just more of the smell of the metals and their interaction with the space environment. So all the metals of the spacecraft and the space station, and especially those involved with the docking compartments. So I think it was actually a pretty similar smell with the Soyuz coming on station. And then just the other day, Christina captured the HTV cargo vehicle. So it was, again, that same similar kind of smell that we had. I think, though, also I was so overwhelmed just with everything that was going on from that whole flight and my arrival into weightlessness and the transition into the space station. Usually my nose is very sensitive and I'm always thinking about smells, but in that first moment I actually wasn't thinking about it that much. Just docking and then coming on the space station for the first time was an absolutely incredible experience.
Thank you. So Gary from Facebook asks, does the moon look farther away from the International Space Station than it does from Earth?
You know, we are not that much closer to the moon than you all are on the surface of the Earth when you think about the relative distances. But the difference is that we aren't looking through the Earth's atmosphere when we look at the moon. So the size looks about the same, but the clarity is really enhanced here. And because of that, sometimes it feels like it's closer. It definitely makes me think about the Artemis mission and looking forward to going back to the moon in 2024.
Well, Manish from Twitter asks a great question to follow up about the Artemis program. If you had the opportunity to go to the moon, what would you be most interested in seeing or doing?
I would love the opportunity to go back to the moon. I think that's something that everybody in our office has been thinking about as we start planning and moving toward these Artemis missions. I think for me, just going out there, exploring, and adding to the scientific data set that we already have, there are so many questions that are still left unanswered from the Apollo missions, so it would be amazing to be able to contribute to those, especially looking at the planetary geology, and especially for me, looking at the astrobiology type experiments and that kind of looking for, you know, any evidence, looking for yeah, any of those types of experiments, I think, looking at the planetary geology especially.
Awesome. So Peter from Facebook asks, which aspect of the research that you're doing aboard station today excites you most and why?
I think the research on board Space Station that excites me the most is twofold. One is the research that we're doing that's going to inform our future exploration deeper into space, going back to the moon and eventually on to Mars. We're studying the long-duration effects of spaceflight on humans and on the life support systems that are required to support our life working and living in space. And secondly, the type of research is that goes back to benefit life on Earth. And one of the most exciting ones of that type for me is that of pharmaceuticals. In microgravity, we have the opportunity to grow crystals that may eventually be used to make better medicines for some very, very important diseases on Earth. And all that is enabled by the microgravity research lab that we have around us in the International Space Station.
Sounds exciting. So Jean from Facebook asks, what's your advice for young girls interested in space, in science, and NASA?
Well, I think the advice that I often give most young people is really to make sure that you identify what it is you're passionate about. You know, that sounds kind of trite. We say it all the time, but it really is true. I really don't think that you can really excel at something and, more importantly, be happy doing it if it's not something that you're really passionate about. Of course, it also takes a lot of hard work, and there's some luck involved, too. I know for both Christina and I, we could have never imagined that our childhood dream would come true and the two of us would be here together doing this event and talking to everybody else. So I think it is proof that dreams really can come true if you can identify that passion and then, of course, really work hard toward it and have things line up correctly.
Well, I think we only have time for one more question, so let's make it a fun one. Clayton from Facebook asks, how often do you take a break to stop and admire the view?
Well, we do have very long work days, 12-hour days from start to finish. Those are days that consist mostly of doing science and doing maintenance and upgrades on the space station systems. So when we do catch a break in between those activities, we may go to what I call the bay window of the space station, or what we call the cupola module. And basically, it's a series of 7 windows that look down on Earth, and they are amazing. After work, we also can enjoy the cupola, and on particularly exciting passes, like when we're going over a site on the Earth that everyone's interested in, either because of a weather phenomenon or it's a place that we all know and love from home, you can often find all 6, or in this case 9, astronauts packed into the cupola to take a peek.
Well, Jessica and Christina, thank you so much for taking time to answer our questions today. We look forward to seeing you back on Earth.
Thank you. It's our pleasure to be with you today, and thanks for all the great questions from Ask NASA.
Station, this is Houston ACR. That concludes the NASA headquarters portion of the event. Please stand by for a voice check from NPR.
Station, this is NPR. How do you hear me?
We have you loud and clear, NPR. How do you hear us?
You sound great. Hi, this is Manny Sophia. Thank you so much for taking time to talk to us from space. Very cool. I'll get right to it. Apparently, y'all are busy up there. So, Jessica, I know you two are friends and that you've been training together for years. What's it like to finally be up there in space together?
It's really difficult to describe. Christina and I were both in the same class. As you mentioned, we started together in 2013, so it's been 6 years now. And in particular, the last couple of years, Christina and I spent a lot of time training together in Star City, the cosmonaut training center about an hour outside Moscow for the Russian Space Agency, since we both flew up here on Russian rockets. And we were essentially, we called ourselves Space Sisters because we were together, really joined at the hip, going through all the classes together. It is an amazing experience, of course, just to even be up here and have the dream of being in space come true. But to come through the hatch and see my best friends, my classmates, my astro brothers and sisters makes it even more special than it already is. So we are all smiles up here with this reunion.
That's great. Okay, Christina, this is a question for you. There's been some press about how you're slated to set this record for the longest single space flight by a woman. I'm genuinely curious, does it ever bother you that your accomplishments are often talked about in terms of your gender, or do you think it's really important to mark these milestones?
That is something I've done a lot of thinking and reflecting on. And in the end, I do think it's important. And I think it's important because of the historical nature of what we're doing, and that in the past, women haven't always been at the table. And it's wonderful to be contributing to the human spaceflight program at a time when all contributions are being accepted, when everyone has a role. And that can lead in turn to an increased chance for success. There are a lot of people that derive motivation from inspiring stories from people that look like them, and I think it's an important aspect of the story to tell.
What about you, Jessica? How do you feel about it?
I think Christina gave the perfect answer. You know, it is really what we're doing now shows all of the work that went in for the decades prior, all of the women that worked to get us where we are today. And I think the nice thing is for us, we don't even really think about it on a daily basis. It's just normal. We're part of the team. We're doing this work as an efficient team working together with everybody else. So it's really nice to see how far that we've come.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes sense to me. In recent years, there's definitely been more and more opportunities for women in space, and there's been a lot of progress. What do you think still needs to be done to change the field so that it's truly equitable?
I think anytime you're involved in an industry that has such a long lead time for technology advancements to be integrated into that industry, there are some legacy things that go on. I think that we had that highlighted last year. We have a situation where we had a spacesuit cause a change in personnel to a spacewalk. And so I think just allowing the time to pass, that the different things that we have come to recognize are required to incorporate people of all shapes and sizes fully into the program. But I don't see any institutional things that change. Jessica and I are held to the exact same training standards. We're treated the same in terms of assignments for various missions on board, and I think that's the important part. We work together as a team, and between us and between the crew and our teams on the ground, we don't look at gender and we don't see it as a barrier.
Yeah, I'd like to touch back on the spacesuit situation. I mean, for years, there's been some concern about the availability of those spacesuits that fit women. And of course, like you said, that was kind of brought back up after the canceled all women spacewalk. So, are you both fully satisfied with the spacesuit situation up there? Like, are we good?
Yes, that spacewalk that had originally been planned to be conducted by Anne McLean and myself was not canceled itself. It still happened with a different crew to make sure that we matched the spacesuit sizes and conducted that spacewalk as safely as possible to get the mission done. We currently do happen to have 2 medium spacesuits on board now. That was a job that I was able to do in the meantime to configure a new one. So I think Jessica and I both have trained throughout our 6 years together in the sizes that are available on board right now.
Christina, I'm interested on just like a personal level. Was that disappointing for you, or were you like, this is all about the job? I mean, I know there was a ton of press around it, so I'm just interested in like a personal level what that felt like.
Absolutely. I am fortunate to be up here with crewmates that I have trained with because we're all in the same astronaut class for many years. I consider it a privilege to go out the door and conduct a spacewalk with anyone on board, and so it was absolutely not a disappointment. I think that the correct decision was made to accomplish the mission, to do so as safely and with the most risk mitigation in place as possible. So I think it was a great move, and Anne and I, of course, were up here together, and the decision was made on board. So I would never call the opportunity to contribute to the program by conducting a spacewalk a disappointment in any way at all.
Yeah, can you give me a little more information on the decision making that was behind the spacewalk and whether or not to cancel it or go forward with one female astronaut and one male?
Interestingly, as Ann and I were able to explain and talk about after the spacewalk, Anne made that decision, and the teams completely supported her in that decision. It was discussed on board, and it was discussed with the teams on the ground, and we're just so glad that we have such a supportive team that all knew that that was the right call to make. And that decision was made, and that call was made after gathering the information on the first spacewalk that was conducted in a series of 3. So it's just wonderful to be working with teams that all see the same priorities and that all know that our main mission here is to do our job safely.
Okay, Christina, you just said you've got 2 medium spacesuits ready to go. Is there a chance that we are going to see Jessica, Meir, Christina Koch, all-woman spacewalk going on?
Yeah, so right now we have 5 EVAs coming up, 5 spacewalks coming up to replace the batteries. So basically to upgrade to the new lithium-ion batteries that will better serve the power supply aboard the space station. Since we have a series of 5 spacewalks coming up, and we're doing that in a short proximity of time, as Christina mentioned, everybody up here is fully qualified to do a spacewalk. So I think that we can see any possible combination of personnel going out the door. We'll all be doing spacewalks, and there'll probably be several different combinations. We still don't know the final assignments for all of those, but yeah, there's a chance that we could be doing it together. Just any of the combinations are a possibility.
Awesome. I am going to take that as a hopefully on my end. Okay, this is a genuinely just curious space question that I couldn't not ask, and it's for both of you. You dream about this and you picture these moments of being in space for years, I imagine. What's the one thing that was the most different from your expectations? The thing that surprised you the most about being in space?
Well, since I just got up here, I think some of the things that have surprised me so far, it's very interesting because, of course, we spend so much time training on the ground. And in Houston, we have a full mock-up, life-size, of all of this. And we also have the Russian segment. We don't have as high fidelity in Houston, but in Star City, we also have a good mock-up of that. So we get there's this level of familiarity when you arrive on board the space station. Okay, I've trained this, but then it feels really, really different. And I think the biggest difference is because we are just using the whole 3-dimensional space in microgravity. When I have been training in Houston in the lab, for example, where we are right now, you're always standing on the deck like we are right now, and you're always working in that orientation. But up here, right now we're on the deck, but then 1 minute I might go over here and be completely in the other orientation like Christina's showing you now. And what I found so far, it's really interesting when you're thinking about the plasticity of the human brain. For me right now, being a newcomer on board, once I know where I'm going and I get into that position, but once I've spent several minutes or a while in that position working, my brain kind of reorients to, okay, feet must be down, I must be on the deck again, but I'm really not. I might be up here. And so after I come out of that position, it takes my brain a minute to figure out my spatial awareness and figure out where I'm going. And from talking to Christina and our other crewmates up here, they've mentioned that, they had the same kind of thing at first, but then at some point your brain sort of shifts. And instead of using that map that you've been trained to in the gravity environment your whole life, instead your brain is kind of picking up on cues using, for example, pieces of equipment, and you know where it is. So even if I'm up there and I come out, I see this piece of equipment, which is the cycle ergometer, so the bicycle that we have to exercise on the space station. And my brain knows where that should be in relation to everyone else, to everything else. And so then I can just continue on and I know where I am. So I'm kind of waiting for that shift because right now it's really interesting. Every once in a while, the space station kind of flips on me and I don't even notice it. But I think it's going to be really interesting for me as a physiologist to observe that kind of plasticity, how the brain can adapt and change to new environments.
Okay, well, Christina and Jessica, thank you so much for your time. Congratulations up there.
Thank you so much.
Station, this is Houston ACR. That concludes the event. Thank you.
Thank you to all the participants from NASA headquarters and NPR. Station, we are now resuming operational audio communications.